What you see here is the work called VANISH. It's the last of the three major projects which were dealing with the whole idea of self-portrait. The first one of those was called I Appear and Disappear. It was just a series, was 20 of them. After that, I extended that project again in a project called I Disappear. I decided to make a group of 80 figures, but I started glazing them in different colors. It was basically quite interesting to kind of populate the space in a dealer gallery with 80 figures and kind of form some sort of installation, but then still have that possibilities of work operating after the show as individual set of 8 and so on. After that, John and Joe Gao from Connells Bay invited me to kind of look at one of their sites. And I went over to Waiheke a few times and I spent a bit of time in the site, and I was thinking what I would like to do and what would really work as a kind of permanent installation. And they were very interested in some of my type of work which would use multiples. I kind of always wanted to do some project which would kind of start with sort of self-portrait of myself, but then use the natural qualities of shrinkage of clay and kind of do it to the degree that I will literally disappear. Then I came up with the idea that maybe the last extension of this sort of self-portraiture work will actually function really well in that side. So I'll just start pressing the biggest of the figure. As you see, I'm just opening one of the clay bags from Dunedin. It's called Abbott's sculptural clay. It's quite a tough stoneware, which has bits of already fired clay in it, and that's what makes it kind of a bit tougher. And the idea is that we slice these slabs into plates and we start pressing those plates into the mold. And we try to be really careful in terms of how we do that. And we also try to control the thickness, because with clay you always kind of deal with shrinkage. So when there is even thickness, it's much more likely that, you know, figure will survive and will not crack and so on. Obviously the mold is kind of really important part of the whole process. If the mold is not fitting together well, the whole figure will not fit together well. And this whole process was quite a lot about making molds as well. Like if you imagine, there will be 16 different sizes of figures, so there are 16 different molds. Bit of the soup. And after it's filled in, we had to create some holes, because if not, we created the vacuum. When figure shrinks, there'll be again quite a bit of pressure in it. So we always make a few holes for drying and so on. Finished. So we'll leave this mold for about a day or two, so it gets a bit drier, and then we open it and model it and so on. So this figure was in the mold for about 2 days. So basically how it works is that plaster absorbs the moisture from clay, so that makes clay a bit harder. And then after that we obviously have to open, because if you leave the figures in for much longer, they kind of shrink even more, and because it's quite a complex form, you can actually start having some cracks. As you see, you know, we can see some joints between the parts in clay. So at this stage, I just take some modeling tools. And you know, clay is joined because it's pressed from the inside, but you have to connect the form. So you kind of score that kind of joint a bit. But you can see that clay is still, I mean, it's quite hard and strong, because that's the fine balance, especially with kind of larger works in clay. Clay is quite heavy. You know, a figure like that, for instance, has about 60 kilos of clay. So if you would kind of try to take it out when it's wet, it just wouldn't be strong enough to actually support its weight, and it would just collapse. So as you see, the front part of the mold is made out of two pieces, and that's that you can actually take it off easily without stressing the figure too much, because the front of the figure it's much more intricate than the back in a way. It has the face and a whole lot of other kind of details, and you kind of make it in one piece. And when you take it off, you just kind of unscrew the front part and you pull it apart. So you see, you can just kind of start moving that top and you kind of lift it a bit. I mean, with this project, which kind of grew into 160 figures now, 80 smaller ones, which we can see at the shelves at the back, are made in a technique which is called slip casting. And the 80 big ones are called in a technique called press molding. And at this stage I also make sure that everything is stuck together really well, but I don't finish it. I basically leave it for another maybe day or two, so it dries again a little bit more, becomes a bit firmer, and then I kind of finish all the modeling, and then we brush it with brush, sort of just create kind of a final finish, and then goes to further drying and then slowly into the kiln and so on. If I think about 2 years ago when I started working on the project, and now it's just kind of really satisfying feeling to finally see them inside. I am quite pleased with it in the sense that it is quite a different sort of outdoor work, and I like how you can see the work when you kind of walk in from very far, and then you're very surprised when you actually have a whole grasp of the work when you come in, and then when you walk around it,
Like I really enjoy how when you come in, that size of the big figures in front is larger and exaggerated, and the figures at the back start really disappearing. And then when you walk at the back of the work, they become almost more like they're the same size, and actually even the shape of the work, which is trapezoid from the front, actually becomes very rectangular from the back. So I quite like this kind of little surprises about the work. VANISH is very much work about self-portrait, but for me it's quite interesting to play with the whole idea of self-portrait, because on one side, if you think about VANISH, it might look like a totally inflated ego. I mean, why would you make 160 replicas of yourself? But for me it's quite interesting how the more of me I make, the less of me there is. If I think about self-portrait and kind of history of self-portraiture in art, it was always kind of self-portrait of the artist supposed to portray this kind of romantic notion of genius of the artist. But in this case, I mean, I'm kind of playing with that, and I'm actually kind of trying to connect artists like Russian constructivists did with something, you know, much more part of the general crowd, just, you know, connected with the whole ideas of every day, and kind of artist not being necessarily somebody raised up on the pedestal, but just somebody who is very connected to this contemporary life.